They're laughing. How is she doing this? Jameson Caldwell whispered to himself, his voice a tremor of awe and disbelief as he stood frozen in the doorway of his Atlanta mansion. The sight of his autistic twins, Liam and Lucas, giggling and swaying with their black housekeeper, Maya Johnson, shattered the silence that had gripped his home since his wife's death. In a world bound by grief and rigid routines, Maya's gentle rhythm sparked a light he thought was lost forever. Her presence, unassuming yet profound, unraveled a truth that would redefine family, heal old wounds, and challenge every assumption he held. This journey of music, courage, and unexpected bonds will leave you breathless, wondering how one woman's heart could transform a house of shadows into a home of hope. Drop a comment to share where you're tuning in from and when, and hit subscribe to catch every spark of inspiration. The Caldwell Mansion loomed over Atlanta's Buckhead district like a monument to grief, its Georgian columns stark against the gray September sky of 2025. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of polished oak and the weight of unspoken loss. Jameson Caldwell, a billionaire whose fortune was forged in tech empires, moved through the halls like a ghost, his footsteps muffled by Persian rugs. His world had fractured 8 years ago when Sarah, his wife, slipped away during the birth of their twin sons, Liam and Lucas. The boys, now 8, were locked in their own silent universe, their autism rendering them nonverbal, their eyes often fixed on some unseen horizon. The mansion, once vibrant with Sarah's laughter, had become a mausoleum of schedules and sterile routines, a place where joy was a forgotten guest. Jameson stood at the window of his study, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, his dark eyes scanning the manicured lawn below. The world outside moved on. Cars glided down Peachtree Road, leaves drifted in the autumn breeze. But inside, time was frozen. Liam and Lucas sat in the dining room, their small hands folded tightly, as if clutching the last remnants of warmth. Their therapist, Dr. Rachel Bennett, had just left, her clipboard filled with charts that measured progress in millimeters, if at all. Jameson clung to those charts, to the structure they promised, because without them, he feared he'd drown in the void Sarah left behind. The doorbell chimed, a sharp note that cut through the silence. Jameson didn't move. He wasn't expecting visitors. Downstairs, the head housekeeper, Eleanor Grayson, a white woman with a face carved from disapproval, opened the door. Maya Johnson stood on the threshold, her dark skin catching the light of the setting sun, her cloth bag slung over one shoulder. She was 30, with a posture that spoke of resilience, her eyes warm but guarded. The security guard, a burly man named Carl, squinted at her papers. "Delivery?" he asked, his tone polite but edged with assumption. "I'm the new housekeeper for the Caldwell household," Maya replied, her voice steady, a professional smile masking the sting of his words. Carl's eyes lingered a moment too long, but the electric lock buzzed, granting her entry. Eleanor led Maya inside, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "This house runs on order," Eleanor said, her voice as crisp as her starched apron. "No disruptions, no experiments. The boys need quiet." Maya nodded, her gaze softening like a candle flickering in a drafty room. She noticed the stillness, the way the air seemed to hold its breath, but she said nothing. In the kitchen, Maya began her work, wiping down counters that gleamed under the chandelier's cold light. Liam and Lucas sat at the oak table, their faces blank, their bodies rigid. The twins were mirror images, sandy hair, pale skin, eyes that rarely met anyone's gaze. Maya watched them from the corner of her eye, counting her breaths to steady herself. She'd seen grief before, in her own life, in the child she'd lost years ago. A wound she carried like a shadow. But this house felt different, as if sorrow had seeped into the walls. Then, almost without thinking, Maya hummed a gospel tune, soft as a whisper, a melody her mother used to sing in their small Savannah apartment. The notes were barely audible, but Liam's fingers twitched, tapping the table in a faint echo of the rhythm. Lucas tilted his head, his brows furrowing as if deciphering a puzzle. Maya paused, her cloth still in hand but kept humming, letting the sound weave through the air. She didn't expect a response, not really, But the sight of Liam's tapping fingers sent a spark through her chest. Upstairs, Jameson was retrieving a forgotten tablet from his study when the faint hum reached him. He frowned, descending the grand staircase, his hand trailing the polished banister. The kitchen door was ajar, and he stopped short, his breath catching. There, in the sterile glow of the kitchen, Maya stood by the sink, her shoulders swaying gently as she scrubbed a pan. Liam and Lucas, still at the table, were no longer still. Liam gripped a spoon, tapping it against the table in time with Maya's hum. Lucas, clutching a napkin, rocked slightly, his lips parting in what might have been a smile. And then, as Maya turned, her eyes catching the boys, she set down the pan and began to move. Nothing dramatic, just a gentle sway, her hands mimicking the rhythm in the air. The boys watched, transfixed. Liam's spoon clattered faster, and Lucas let out a soft, guttural sound, a laugh, raw and unfamiliar. Jameson's heart lurched. He hadn't heard his sons laugh in years, not since before Sarah's death. The sound was a blade, cutting through the fog of his grief, sharp and disorienting. Maya, unaware of his presence, bent down to the boy's level, her hands guiding theirs in a playful mimicry of her movements. She signed a simple word, dance, her fingers shaping the air with care. Liam wobbled to his feet, clutching her sleeve for balance. Lucas followed, his movements clumsy but radiant. Jameson stood frozen at the threshold, one hand gripping the doorframe. The kitchen, always a place of order, meals prepped, schedules followed, felt alive, as if someone had cracked open a window to let in the sun. Flour dusted the counter in tiny clouds, and the boys' laughter bounced off the walls like a melody long forgotten. But alongside the warmth came a pang of unease. This wasn't part of the plan, the carefully curated therapy sessions, the charts that promised progress. Maya was an outsider, a housekeeper, not a specialist. Yet here she was, coaxing life from his sons in a way no doctor had. Eleanor appeared behind him, her lips pursed. "Mr. Caldwell," she whispered, "this isn't appropriate. The boys need structure, not this." Her words were a tether, pulling him back to the familiar. Jameson's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. He watched as Maya lowered the volume of her humming, her smile unwavering, her hands still guiding the boys. Liam stumbled and she caught him, her gaze steady as a lighthouse. Lucas clapped, his laughter bubbling like a stream breaking free. Jameson's chest tightened, a storm of emotions swirling. Hope, fear, guilt. He wanted to step forward, to join the circle, but his feet wouldn't move. He was an observer, always had been since Sarah's death, standing at the edge of his own life. Maya glanced up, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment. She didn't stop, didn't falter, but her gaze held an invitation, soft and unspoken. Jameson didn't step in, nor did he turn away. He stood, hand on his chest, feeling something stir, a crack in the ice that had encased his heart for years. The hum faded, and Maya clapped softly, bowing to the twins as if they were performers on a stage. Liam hugged her leg, Lucas held his brother's hand, and the kitchen fell quiet again. Jameson exhaled, the sound louder than he intended. "Thank you," he said, his voice low, uncertain who he was addressing. Maya gave a small nod, her eyes warm but unintrusive. Outside, the Atlanta skyline glittered in the dusk. But inside, something had shifted, a flicker of light piercing the shadows of the Caldwell mansion. The Caldwell mansion woke to the same sterile rhythm it had known for years, its halls echoing with the faint hum of Atlanta's morning traffic beyond the iron gates. In the kitchen, the air still held a whisper of yesterday's gospel tune, as if the walls themselves were reluctant to let it go. Maya Johnson, her apron tied neatly, moved with purpose, polishing silverware that gleamed under the chandelier's cold light. Her dark eyes flicked to Liam and Lucas, seated at the oak table, their small hands folded tightly, their faces blank as untouched canvases. The twins, 8 years old and trapped in the silent world of their autism, seemed to carry the weight of the mansion's grief in their stillness. But Maya had seen the spark yesterday, their laughter, their clumsy dance, and it burned in her chest like an ember refusing to die. She worked quietly, mindful of Eleanor Grayson's rules, but her fingers itched to stir the air again. She reached into her cloth bag, pulling out her phone, and selected a Nina Simone track, the volume so low it was barely a murmur. The notes of Feeling Good drifted like a breeze, soft enough to avoid Eleanor's wrath, but strong enough to hum through the table's wood. Maya swayed as she scrubbed a pot, her movements subtle, a private rebellion against the house's suffocating order. Liam's fingers twitched, tapping the table in a hesitant echo of the rhythm. Lucas tilted his head, his eyes flickering with curiosity, as if the music were a language he was beginning to understand. Upstairs, Jameson Caldwell sat in his study, the memory of yesterday's scene gnawing at him. The twins' laughter had been a jolt, a crack in the fortress of control he'd built since Sarah's death. He stared at a spreadsheet, numbers blurring as his mind replayed the image of Maya guiding his son's hands, their faces alight with joy. It unsettled him, this breach in routine, this woman who dared to bring music into a house that had forbidden it. He stood adjusting his tie and descended the staircase, driven by a need to restore order. In the kitchen, Maya noticed Liam's tapping grow bolder, his spoon clattering against a glass. Lucas, clutching a napkin, rocked gently, his lips parting in a faint giggle. Maya set down her cloth, her heart quickening. She moved to the twins' side, crouching to their level, and began to mimic their rhythm, her hands weaving through the air like a conductor. "Dance," she signed, her fingers deliberate, her smile a beacon. Liam wobbled to his feet, his movements awkward but eager, gripping her apron for balance. Lucas followed, his giggle erupting into a full-throated laugh that bounced off the brick walls, a sound so rare it felt like a miracle. The kitchen door swung open, and Eleanor Grayson stood there, her face a mask of disapproval. "Miss Johnson," she said, her voice sharp as a knife, "this is a kitchen, not a dance hall. The boys need structure, not chaos." Maya lowered the music, her smile steady, but her eyes unyielding. "I'm just cleaning, ma'am," she said softly, her hands still guiding Liam's in a gentle rhythm. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line, but before she could speak, Jameson appeared behind her, his presence filling the doorway like a storm cloud. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice low but edged with authority. The twins froze, their laughter fading. Maya stood, meeting his gaze. "I'm doing my job, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her tone calm but firm. "The music helps me work. It seems to help them, too." She gestured to Liam and Lucas, who clung to each other, their eyes darting between their father and Maya. Jameson's jaw tightened. "My sons need therapy, schedules, not games," he said, the word dripping with disdain. He stepped closer, his height towering over her, but Maya didn't flinch. "Joy isn't a game, sir," she replied, her voice steady as a pulse. "It's a way to reach them. They're not machines to be programmed." The words hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in quiet conviction. Eleanor gasped softly, her hand clutching her clipboard as if it were a shield. Jameson's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. This woman, a housekeeper, dared to lecture him in his own home. Yet the memory of his son's laughter clawed at him, stirring a guilt he couldn't name. He thought of Sarah, her love for music, the way she'd hummed to the twins in her womb. The kitchen felt too small, the air too thick. "You're not a therapist," he said finally, his voice colder than he intended. "Stick to your duties." He turned to leave, but Maya's voice stopped him. "They're your sons, Mr. Caldwell," she said softly. "They're starving for something no chart can give them." The words struck like a stone, rippling through his defenses. He didn't turn back, but his hand lingered on the doorframe, his knuckles white. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice low. "I'll handle this, sir," she said, shooting Maya a warning glance. "Miss Johnson, no more music. Understood?" Maya nodded, but her eyes stayed on Jameson's retreating figure. She turned back to the twins, kneeling to sign play, with a gentle smile. Liam reached for her hand, Lucas rocked softly, and the kitchen for a moment held its breath. The music was gone, but the rhythm lingered in their small movements, a silent defiance of the house's rules. Jameson returned to his study, the door closing with a heavy thud. He sank into his chair, staring at a photo of Sarah on his desk, her smile frozen in time. The twins' laughter echoed in his mind, a sound he hadn't heard since before the hospital, before the silence that had swallowed his family. He wanted to dismiss Maya's words, to cling to the safety of schedules, but the image of his sons, alive, laughing, moving, gnawed at him. He rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of a house that had forgotten how to breathe. Downstairs, Maya resumed her work, wiping down the counter with deliberate care. She glanced at the twins, their faces once again blank, but their fingers still twitched, as if chasing the ghost of the music. She didn't hum, didn't sway, but her heart held the rhythm, a promise she'd keep fighting for them, even if the house demanded silence. Outside, the Atlanta morning brightened, the city waking to its own pulse. But inside the mansion, a crack had formed in the shadows, small but undeniable, letting in the faintest sliver of light. The Caldwell mansion, bathed in the soft amber of Atlanta's late morning sun, stood as rigid as ever, its walls holding fast to the silence that had become its heartbeat. Maya Johnson moved through the dining room, her cloth gliding over the mahogany table with a precision that belied the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. The confrontation with Jameson lingered like a bruise, his words, "Stick to your duties," echoing in her mind. Yet the memory of Liam and Lucas's laughter, fragile but fierce, fueled her resolve. She glanced at the twins, seated on the floor with their stack of colored blocks, their small hands moving mechanically, as if the joy of yesterday had been locked away again. The house demanded order, but Maya knew order alone couldn't heal a heart. She adjusted her apron, her fingers brushing the phone in her pocket. No music today, not after Eleanor's warning, but Maya wasn't one to surrender easily. She'd grown up in Savannah, where her mother turned dishwashing into a dance and laundry into a song, weaving joy into the mundane. Maya crouched near the twins, picking up a red block and tapping it rhythmically on the floor. Once, twice, 3 times. Liam's eyes flicked toward her, his fingers pausing mid-stack. Lucas tilted his head, a faint crease forming between his brows. Maya smiled, her hands moving in a slow, deliberate pattern, mimicking a game of stacking blocks to an invisible beat. "Play," she signed, her fingers shaping the word with care, her eyes warm as a hearth. Liam hesitated, then tapped a blue block against the floor, mimicking her rhythm. Lucas followed, his movements clumsier but eager, a soft giggle escaping his lips. The sound was a spark in the dim room, and Maya fanned it gently, arranging the blocks into a colorful tower, each placement timed to an unspoken melody. The twins leaned closer, their faces no longer blank but alive with focus. Maya's heart swelled. She wasn't breaking rules, not exactly. Just cleaning up, making a game of it, turning the mundane into magic. From the hallway, Eleanor Grayson's heels clicked ominously, her presence like a cold draft. She stopped at the doorway, her clipboard clutched tightly. "Miss Johnson," she said, her voice sharp, "this is not a playground. The boys have a therapy session at noon." Maya stood, brushing her hands on her apron, her smile unwavering. "Just tidying up, Mrs. Grayson," she said, gesturing to the neatly stacked blocks. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, but the twins' quiet focus disarmed her. She huffed and turned away, her heels fading down the hall. Maya knelt again, signing good to the twins, her thumbs up a beacon of encouragement. Liam reached for her hand, his touch tentative but warm. Lucas rocked gently, his giggle bubbling up again, a sound that seemed to push back the mansion's heavy air. Maya felt a pang of her own loss, her daughter gone too soon, but she tucked it away, letting the twins' joy anchor her. Upstairs, Jameson sat in his study, the door ajar, the faint sound of the twins' giggles drifting up like a forgotten melody. He'd been staring at the same contract for an hour, his pen idle, his mind replaying Maya's words. They're starving for something no chart can give them. The twins' laughter from yesterday, sparked by her humming, haunted him. He thought of Sarah, her love for jazz, the way she'd sway in this very room, her laughter filling the spaces now choked with silence. He pushed the thought away, but it clung like damp air. He stood drawn to the sound and descended the staircase, his steps slow, deliberate. From the dining room doorway, he watched Maya guide the twins in their block game, her hands weaving a rhythm without music, her face alight with a warmth he hadn't seen since Sarah. Liam stacked a yellow block, his movements precise, while Lucas clapped, his laughter a bright, staccato burst. Jameson's chest tightened, a mix of awe and unease. This wasn't therapy, wasn't part of Dr. Bennett's meticulous plans. Yet his sons were present, engaged in a way he hadn't seen in years. The front door opened, and Mrs. Thompson, a white neighbor with a penchant for gossip, stepped in, carrying a tray of scones. "Oh, how lovely!" she exclaimed, seeing the twins at play. She turned to Maya, her smile patronizing. "You're the nanny, aren't you? So good with them." The word nanny landed like a misstep, slotting Maya into a box that didn't fit. Maya's smile faltered for a heartbeat, but she nodded politely. "Just the housekeeper, ma'am," she said, her voice steady. "Helping out where I can." Jameson's jaw clenched. He wanted to correct Mrs. Thompson, to say something, but the weight of his own silence held him back. He watched as Maya returned to the twins, her hands guiding theirs, her presence a quiet defiance of the label. Mrs. Thompson left, oblivious to the tension, and Jameson remained in the doorway, an observer caught between worlds. Later, as Maya dusted a bookshelf in the living room, she paused at a silver frame half hidden behind a vase, its edges coated in dust. She wiped it clean, revealing Sarah's face. Bright eyes, a smile tilted like sunlight. Maya's breath caught. She knew that kind of loss, the kind that left a hole no time could fill. She didn't return the frame to its high shelf. Instead, she placed it low, at the twins' eye level, on a side table where they could see it. Liam noticed first, his fingers brushing the glass, his face softening. Lucas joined him, their small hands hovering over the photo as if touching a memory. Jameson, passing by, froze. The sight of his sons gazing at Sarah's face, their expressions unguarded, hit him like a wave. He wanted to speak, to ask Maya why she'd done it, to demand she put the frame back where it belonged, out of sight, where it couldn't hurt. But he didn't. He stood, his hand on the banister, feeling the mansion's shadows shift, as if a window had been cracked open. Maya glanced at him, her eyes holding no challenge, only understanding. She signed mother to the twins, her fingers gentle and they mimicked her, their movements clumsy but earnest. The moment stretched, fragile and heavy. Jameson's throat tightened, his mind warring between the safety of control and the pull of something new, something alive. He turned away, retreating to his study, but the twins' giggles followed him, a sound that refused to be silenced. Maya resumed her work, her cloth moving over the furniture, her heart steady. She knew the house was watching, judging, but she also knew the twins were reaching for her, and she wouldn't let them go. Outside, Atlanta's skyline shimmered in the noon light, but inside, a glimmer of joy had taken root, small but stubborn, in a house that had forgotten how to feel. The Caldwell mansion pulsed with the tension of a held breath, its polished surfaces reflecting the late afternoon light like a mirror to unspoken grief. In the living room, Maya Johnson knelt beside Liam and Lucas, her hands guiding theirs in a quiet game of stacking blocks to an imagined rhythm. The twins, their faces usually blank as untouched snow, flickered with focus, their fingers trembling with purpose. Maya's cloth bag sat on a chair, the phone inside silent but heavy with the promise of music that had sparked their joy days ago. The air was thick with the weight of Eleanor Grayson's rules and Jameson Caldwell's expectations. But Maya moved with a defiance as soft as a whisper, her dark eyes steady, her heart anchored by the twins' fleeting smiles. Upstairs, Jameson paced his study, the memory of Sarah's photo, now at the twins' eye level, burning in his mind. Maya's boldness, placing it there without permission, stirred a storm in him. Gratitude tangled with resentment, hope clashing with fear. He'd built his life on control since Sarah's death, each therapy session a brick in a wall to keep pain at bay. But the twins' laughter, sparked by Maya's humming and games, had cracked that wall, and he wasn't ready for what lay on the other side. The doorbell chimed, sharp and intrusive, signaling the arrival of Dr. Rachel Bennett, the therapist whose charts promised progress but delivered only numbers. Downstairs, Dr. Bennett entered, her white coat crisp, her clipboard a shield. She nodded curtly at Maya. "Thank you, Miss Johnson, for your support," she said, the word light but edged with dismissal. placing Maya firmly outside the circle of authority. Eleanor hovered nearby, her eyes darting between Maya and the twins, her disapproval a silent hum. Dr. Bennett knelt before Liam and Lucas, her voice measured. "Show me the signs you've learned," she said, her pen poised. Liam raised his hand, hesitant, but Dr. Bennett's piercing gaze, clinical, unyielding, froze his fingers. Lucas slid closer to Maya, burying his face in her apron, the faint scent of soap a comfort. Silence fell, heavy as lead. Jameson, watching from the doorway, felt his stomach twist. "Come on, son," he urged, his voice too bright, too desperate. "Sign it." Dr. Bennett jotted notes, her face impassive. "Children often imitate in play settings," she said, her tone neutral. "It doesn't equate to meaningful progress. I'm glad the family's having quality time, but don't confuse feelings with developmental milestones." The words landed like a cold draft, chilling the room. Jameson's heart sank, the hope he'd barely acknowledged crumbling under the weight of her verdict. He looked at his sons, silent, clinging to Maya, and shame twisted into anger. "You gave me an illusion," he said, his voice low, turning to Maya. "Anyone can make kids laugh. When it matters, they go silent again." The accusation cut through the air, sharp and unfair. Maya straightened, her eyes gentle but unyielding. "Here, faith is what keeps them alive," she said slowly, her voice steady as a pulse. "Reports don't teach children to wait their turn, to meet someone's eyes, to name their feelings. I'm not replacing doctors. I'm opening a door so they'll want to walk through." Dr. Bennett glanced at her watch, unmoved. "I only want to avoid false hope," she replied, her tone flat. "Hope isn't false," Maya answered, her voice soft but firm. "Only adults are afraid of it." The room crackled with tension, Eleanor's clipboard trembling in her hands. Dr. Bennett closed her folder, excused herself, and left, the door shutting like a gavel. Jameson turned away, his hands shaking with anger, not at Maya, but at himself. He'd laid out his sons like specimens, begging for approval, and when it didn't come, he'd lashed out at the one person who'd brought laughter back to the house. Maya knelt beside the twins, smoothing their backs as if ironing out wrinkles, her gaze passing through Jameson like a mirror reflecting a man too afraid to hope. The silence stretched, broken only by Liam's sudden movement. He reached for the photo of Sarah on the side table, his small hand brushing the glass. Lucas joined him, his fingers tracing the frame, and then, with a trembling hand, he signed Mama, the gesture clumsy but clear. Liam mimicked him, his eyes bright with recognition. Jameson froze, his breath catching as if someone had knocked on his chest. His knees buckled, and he sank to the floor, his voice cracking like dry wood. "Yes," he whispered, "that's your mother." The twins turned to him, Liam's hand reaching out, Lucas leaning against his shoulder. Maya stepped back, her presence a quiet anchor, giving them space to hold the moment. Jameson's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he saw her, not as the housekeeper, not as an intruder, but as someone who'd reached his sons where he couldn't. The revelation was a blade, cutting through his defenses, exposing the raw truth. Maya had lost a child too, yet she poured her heart into his. Her vulnerability, shared in a quiet aside during the confrontation, shattered his assumptions, forcing him to confront the biases he'd never named. He wanted to apologize, to bridge the gap, but the words caught in his throat. Maya returned to her work, wiping down the table, her movements deliberate, her face calm, but heavy with the weight of being seen and unseen. The twins clung to her apron, their eyes searching hers for reassurance. Outside, Atlanta's skyline glowed in the dusk, but inside the mansion felt different. Warmer, as if a fire had been lit in a long cold hearth. Jameson stood, his hand lingering on the photo of Sarah, his heart a battlefield of guilt and gratitude. Maya had opened a door, and though he wasn't ready to step through, he couldn't close it again. The truth, raw and heartbreaking, hung in the air. His sons were reaching for life, and he was still learning how to follow. The Caldwell mansion, bathed in the soft glow of Atlanta's twilight, seemed to exhale for the first time in years. The air, once thick with grief, carried a faint pulse of something new. Hope, fragile as a fledgling's wing. Maya Johnson moved through the kitchen, her cloth gliding over the counter, her movements deliberate but lighter, as if the weight of yesterday's confrontation had lifted, if only slightly. Liam and Lucas sat at the table, their small hands stacking blocks with a focus that belied their usual detachment. The photo of Sarah, their mother, stood on the side table, its presence a quiet bridge between past and present. Maya's eyes flicked to it, her heart steady but heavy with the memory of her own loss, a child gone too soon. She signed play to the twins, her fingers gentle, and their faces lit up. Liam tapping a block in rhythm, Lucas rocking with a soft giggle. Upstairs, Jameson Caldwell stood at his study window, his tie loosened, his gaze fixed on the city skyline. The scene in the living room, Lucas signing Mama, Liam reaching for him, Maya's unwavering presence, had cracked something open in him. He'd spent years building walls, using schedules and therapy to keep grief at bay. But Maya's words echoed, hope isn't false. Only adults are afraid of it. His anger at her, born of shame, had dissolved into a raw ache. She'd reached his sons, autistic and silent, in a way his charts and specialists never could. Yet admitting it meant dismantling the control he clung to, and that terrified him. Downstairs, the kitchen door creaked open, and Eleanor Grayson entered, her face a mask of disapproval. "Miss Johnson," she said, her voice sharp as a blade, "the boys' therapy session is in 10 minutes. No more games." Maya nodded, her smile calm but unyielding. "Just cleaning up, Mrs. Grayson," she replied, stacking the blocks neatly. Eleanor's eyes narrowed, but the twins' quiet focus disarmed her. She turned to leave, then paused. "Mr. Caldwell will hear about this," she warned, her heels clicking as she exited. Maya sighed, her fingers brushing Liam's hand as she signed good, her thumbs up a beacon of encouragement. Jameson descended the staircase, drawn by the twins' soft giggles. He stopped at the kitchen doorway, his breath catching. Maya knelt beside the twins, guiding their hands in a game of tapping blocks to an imagined beat. Liam's movements were precise, Lucas's clumsier but eager, their laughter a melody that pierced the mansion's silence. Then, without warning, Liam turned to Jameson, his small hand trembling as he signed Papa, the gesture hesitant but clear. Lucas followed, his eyes bright, his fingers shaping the same word. The air cracked, as if the house itself had gasped. Jameson's knees weakened, his heart a drumbeat in his chest. He stepped forward, his tailored suit suddenly feeling like armor, too heavy to bear. He knelt, his hands shaking as he signed Papa back, his fingers clumsy but earnest. Liam's mouth opened in awe, his hands clapping his chest. Lucas wrapped himself around his father's arm, his giggle a burst of sunlight. Maya stepped back, her presence a quiet anchor, giving them space to hold the moment. Jameson's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he saw her not as a housekeeper, but as a lifeline. The moment was shattered with the sound of Eleanor's voice from the hallway. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her tone urgent, "Dr. Bennett is here. She's concerned about unorthodox methods." Dr. Rachel Bennett entered, her clipboard clutched tightly, her white coat a symbol of authority. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice measured, "I must caution against these play-based distractions. The boys need structured intervention, not this." She gestured toward Maya, her words dismissing her as an outsider. Eleanor nodded in agreement, her eyes glinting with vindication. Jameson stood, his jaw tight, his son's warmth still lingering on his arm. "Dr. Bennett," he said, his voice steady but sharp, "my son's just signed Papa for the first time. That's not a distraction, that's progress." The room stilled, Eleanor's clipboard trembling in her hands. Dr. Bennett's mouth twitched, but she pressed on. "Imitation in play isn't the same as developmental milestones," she said. "We need data, not sentiment." Jameson's eyes flicked to Maya, who stood quietly, her hands folded, her gaze unyielding. "Data didn't make them laugh," he said, his voice low but firm. "Data didn't make them look at me." He turned to Eleanor. "And you, Mrs. Grayson, have kept this house running, but it's been a tomb. Maya's brought it back to life." Eleanor's face paled, her threat to quit hanging unspoken in the air. She nodded stiffly and retreated, her heels echoing like a fading storm. Dr. Bennett closed her clipboard, her expression unreadable. "I'll review their progress," she said, and left, the door shutting softly behind her. Jameson turned to Maya, his throat tight. "I'm sorry," he said, the words raw, unpolished. "I was wrong to doubt you." Maya nodded, her eyes warm but guarded. "It's not about me, Mr. Caldwell," she said softly. "It's about them." She signed happy to the twins, who clapped in response, their laughter filling the kitchen like a warm breeze. Jameson joined them, kneeling again, his hands mimicking Maya's rhythm, tapping a block against the table. The twins giggled, their faces alight, and for the first time Jameson felt like a father, not an observer. Outside, Atlanta's dusk painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, but inside the mansion glowed with a new warmth. Toys lay scattered on the floor, a defiance of Eleanor's order, and the twins' laughter echoed up the staircase. Maya resumed her work, wiping down the counter, but her heart held the rhythm of the twins' joy. Jameson watched her, his mind wrestling with the truth. This woman, dismissed as the help, had unlocked a door he'd thought sealed forever. The kitchen, once a place of sterile routine, felt alive, its walls humming with the promise of a family finding its way back to each other. The Caldwell mansion, kissed by the soft haze of Atlanta's early evening, seemed to hum with a tentative pulse, as if learning to breathe again. The kitchen, once a sterile shrine to order, now bore traces of life, smudges on the counter, a stray block under the table, the faint echo of laughter lingering in the air. Maya Johnson moved through her task with quiet grace, her cloth wiping down the oak table where Liam and Lucas sat, their small hands arranging colorful blocks in a pattern that mirrored her gentle rhythm. The twins, autistic and nonverbal, were no longer statues in their own home. Their eyes flickered with curiosity, their fingers danced with purpose. Maya signed play to them, her hands shaping the word like a promise, and their faces lit up, Liam tapping a block, Lucas rocking with a soft giggle that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Maya's heart carried the weight of her own loss, a child gone too soon, but also the warmth of the twins' progress. She glanced at Sarah's photo on the side table, its presence a quiet bridge between past and present. The memory of Jameson's apology, raw and unguarded, lingered like a melody she hadn't expected. He'd stood up for her, against Eleanor's rules and Dr. Bennett's skepticism, and that shift, small but seismic, had changed the air in the mansion. Yet Maya knew her place here was fragile, defined by others' assumptions. Her role as a black housekeeper, a box that didn't hold her full story. Jameson descended the staircase, his usual tailored suit replaced by a simple sweater, his steps lighter, as if shedding armor. The twin signing of Papa had cracked open a door in his heart, one he'd kept locked since Sarah's death. He paused at the kitchen doorway, watching Maya guide the twins in their block game, her hands weaving an invisible rhythm. Liam stacked a red block, his movements precise, while Lucas clapped, his laughter a bright burst that made Jameson's chest ache with a mix of pride and guilt. He'd been an observer too long, standing at the edge of his son's world, but Maya had shown him a way in. He cleared his throat, stepping into the kitchen. "Maya," he said, his voice soft but steady, "I'm hosting a small gathering in the backyard tonight. Just neighbors, a few friends. I'd like you to join us, not as staff." Maya paused, her cloth still, her eyes meeting his with a guarded warmth. "That's kind of you, Mr. Caldwell," she said, "but I've got work to finish." He shook his head. "The work can wait. The boys need you there. I need you there." The words hung heavy, a rare vulnerability from a man used to control. The backyard glowed under string lights, the air warm with the scent of jasmine and grilled food. Neighbors mingled, their chatter a soft hum against the cicadas' song. Liam and Lucas darted among the guests, their hands signing short phrases. Play, happy, without prompting. Jameson watched, his heart swelling as Lucas handed a block to a neighbor's child, waiting patiently for a response. Maya stood near the edge, her apron gone, her simple dress catching the light. She signed good to the twins, her smile a beacon, but her posture betrayed a quiet awareness of eyes that saw her as the help. Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor who'd mistaken Maya for a nanny, approached with a tray of cookies. "The boys are so lively now," she said, then turned to Maya. "You're the housekeeper, right? So talented." The words meant as praise landed like a stone, shrinking Maya's role to a label. A few guests paused, the air tightening. Maya's smile held, but her eyes flickered with a familiar sting. Before she could respond, Jameson stepped forward, his voice clear and firm. "This is Maya Johnson," he said, standing at the center of the small circle. "She's not just the housekeeper. She's the one who brought my sons back to me, and me back to them." The air hushed, then warmed again. Mrs. Thompson whispered an apology, her face flushed. Maya nodded, signing thank you, her grace disarming the tension. The twins ran to her, Liam tugging her hand, Lucas signing play with a grin. The guests clapped, charmed by the boys' energy, and the backyard felt like a home again, not a mausoleum. Jameson joined the twins, kneeling to stack blocks with them, his hands clumsy but eager. Maya stepped back, giving him space, but her presence anchored the scene, a quiet force that held the family together. Later, as the guests dispersed, Maya sat on a bench, her journal open in her lap. She wrote of the twins' laughter, of Jameson's defense, of the way healing others had begun to mend her own broken places. "Some victories don't need trophies," she wrote, "just a shift in the heart." Her pen paused as she looked at the twins, now chasing fireflies, their giggles rising like sparks. She'd been seen tonight, not as a shadow in the background, but as a woman who'd changed a family. Jameson approached, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. "You didn't have to do that," Maya said, accepting the drink. "Speak up for me, I mean." He shook his head, sitting beside her. "I did. I've been wrong about a lot of things, Maya. I'm learning." His voice was quiet, his eyes on his sons. The twins ran to them, Liam signing happy, Lucas mimicking him. Jameson signed back, his hands steadier now, and the 4 of them sat together, the backyard glowing under the stars. Outside, Atlanta's skyline shimmered, but inside the mansion's grounds, a new rhythm had taken hold. The twins' laughter, Maya's quiet strength, Jameson's tentative steps toward connection. They wove together like a song, fragile but growing stronger. The night stretched on, and the mansion, once a house of shadows, began to pulse with the promise of a family finding its way home. The Caldwell mansion, bathed in the golden glow of an Atlanta evening, seemed to hum with a newfound warmth, as if the walls themselves had learned to sigh with relief. The backyard, where laughter had spilled just nights before, now held a quieter magic, the air soft with the scent of blooming jasmine and the faint buzz of cicadas. Maya Johnson knelt in the grass, tying colorful ribbons to small wooden stakes, her hands steady as she created a winding path for Liam and Lucas. The twins, their faces alight with curiosity, followed her lead, their small hands fumbling but eager as they tied their own ribbons, red and blue fluttering like tiny flags of triumph. The mansion, once a fortress of grief, felt alive, its pulse quickening with every giggle that broke the silence. Maya signed follow to the twins, her fingers shaping the word with care, her smile a beacon that drew them forward. Liam stepped first, his arms swinging for balance, while Lucas moved more slowly, glancing up at Maya for reassurance. She nodded, her thumbs up, a spark of encouragement, and stepped back, letting them navigate the ribbon path on their own. Each stumble, each small fall, was met with a quick brush-off, a lesson in courage woven into the grass. Maya's heart swelled. She saw her own loss reflected in the twins' resilience, her own grief softened by their progress. She wasn't replacing Sarah, she knew that, but she was carving a space where memory and the present could coexist. Jameson Caldwell stood at the edge of the yard, his sweater rolled up at the sleeves, his eyes tracing the path his sons followed. The twins' signing of Papa, Maya's unwavering presence, and the backyard gathering had shifted something fundamental in him. He'd spent years hiding behind schedules, fearing hope as much as grief. But the sight of Liam and Lucas laughing, moving, living had undone him. He clutched a small wooden box in his hands, Sarah's music box, untouched since her death. Its weight felt like a promise, one he was finally ready to keep. He approached the twins, kneeling beside them as they tied a yellow ribbon. "Look," he said, his voice soft, and opened the music box. A delicate melody spilled out, a jazz tune Sarah had loved, its notes weaving through the evening air like a thread. Liam's eyes widened, his fingers tapping the grass in rhythm. Lucas rocked gently, his giggle a soft echo of the music. Jameson signed dance, his hands clumsy but earnest, and the twins clapped, their laughter bursting like fireflies. Maya joined them, her movements fluid, guiding the twins in a gentle sway, the ribboned path a stage for their joy. The moment felt sacred, a ritual that bound them together. Jameson glanced at Sarah's photo, now placed on a garden table, her smile watching over them. He didn't flinch from it anymore. Instead, he signed Mama to the twins, his fingers steady, and they mimicked him, their faces radiant. Maya stepped back, her presence a quiet anchor, letting the family hold the center. Jameson's chest ached, not with grief, but with gratitude, a gratitude that hurt as much as it healed. Later, as the twins chased the last fireflies, Jameson approached Maya, his expression open, unguarded. "I'm starting a community program," he said, his voice low but firm. "Sensory activities for kids like Liam and Lucas, inspired by you. I'd like you to help run it, not as a housekeeper, but as a family advocate." Maya's breath caught, her eyes searching his. "That's a big ask, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her tone warm but cautious. "I'm no expert." He shook his head. "You're the expert they need. You brought us back." Maya nodded, her journal tucked under her arm, its pages filled with sketches of signs and moments of the twins' joy. She'd written of ribbons, of laughter, of a house learning to breathe. "I'll think about it," she said, but her smile betrayed her answer. The twins ran to her, Liam signing happy, Lucas tugging her hand. Jameson joined them, kneeling to tie a final ribbon, his hands brushing theirs. The four sat on a blanket under a sprawling oak, the ribbon path stretching before them like a roadmap of their journey. Liam broke a misshapen cookie in half, offering the bigger piece to Lucas, who pushed it back, splitting it evenly. Jameson whispered something to Maya, a quiet joke about the twins' newfound fairness, and her laughter blended with the cicada's song, warm and unguarded. The twins signed family, their hands small but sure, and Jameson signed back, his fingers steady, his heart open. The mansion, once a house of shadows, glowed with life, handprints on windows, toys scattered on the lawn, a music box humming softly. Outside, Atlanta's skyline sparkled, its lights a distant echo of the warmth in the yard. Maya looked at the twins, at Jameson, and felt the weight of her own grief lighten, not gone but shared, carried by the family they'd built. She hadn't replaced Sarah, but she'd opened a chapter where love could live alongside memory, where mistakes could be mended, where falling meant standing up again. The ribbons fluttered in the breeze, tiny roads leading forward, and the four of them, bound by signs, laughter, and courage, knew they'd walk on together, steady, warm, whole. This story of the Caldwell family and Maya Johnson is a testament to the transformative power of love, resilience, and breaking through barriers of grief and misunderstanding. From a mansion shrouded in silence to a home alive with laughter, it shows how one woman's quiet courage can rewrite a family story, inspiring us to embrace hope over fear and connection over control. Which moment touched you most? Liam and Lucas signing Papa, Maya's unwavering faith, or the ribbon path that led them all to a new beginning? Share your thoughts below. Your stories light the way for others. Thank you for joining us on this journey of healing. Until next time, keep the spark of hope alive.